Machiavelli. The name alone kind of gives you a chill, doesn't it? It's become this shorthand for the dark arts of politics, for manipulation, for cruelty, for doing whatever it takes to get power. But was the man himself really a monster? A genuine teacher of evil? Or was he something way more complicated? Let's try to peel back the layers of the myth and find the real person behind that infamous name.
I mean, think about it. Today, when we call a politician or maybe a character on a TV show Machiavellian, we all know exactly what that means. We're picturing someone who's always scheming, who believes the ends justify the means, no matter how brutal. And that's the myth, right? Machiavelli, the shadowy figure whispering poison into a ruler's ear.
But that begs the big question, the one that really gets to the heart of his legacy. Was that really his goal? To write a how-to guide for tyrants? Or is it possible that we've been missing the point for the last 500 years? To figure that out, we have to look past the caricature and dive into the world that made him.
See, to really get Machiavelli's radical ideas, you first have to understand the world that forged him. This wasn't some professor in an ivory tower writing from a safe, quiet library. Oh no, he was a product of a violent, chaotic, and incredibly dangerous time. His home turf was Renaissance Florence, and while we might picture beautiful art and amazing architecture, it was also a political viper's nest. Seriously, alliances were made in the morning and completely shattered by dinner time. Conspiracies were everywhere, and the threat of war was constant. And Machiavelli? He wasn't just watching from the sidelines, he was right in the middle of the game.
His life was just a total roller coaster of power. For years, he was a big deal, a respected, high-level diplomat for the Florentine Republic. He was an insider. But then in 1512, it all came crashing down. The super-powerful Medici family came roaring back into power, and Machiavelli's whole world just fell apart. He was fired, accused of plotting against them, thrown in jail, and brutally tortured. It was only from that place of total ruin, powerless, broke, and exiled from the city he loved, that he sat down to write The Prince. He was desperately trying to make sense of how power really works and why he had lost everything.
And that, of course, brings us to the book itself. You have to imagine The Prince not as some stuffy work of moral philosophy, but as a brutally practical playbook. It's a cold, clear-eyed instruction manual on how to get power and, more importantly, how to hold on to it.
And here is where he just completely blows up centuries of tradition. See, before him, everyone just assumed a good ruler had to be a good person. Pious, merciful, honest. But Machiavelli came along and asked this radical question. What if being good actually makes you a bad leader? He argued a ruler's one and only job is to keep the state safe. Success isn't judged by God or by conventional morality, it's judged by results, period.
Now, to get those results, a ruler needed what he called virtue. And let's be super clear, this is not our modern word virtue. Virtue has absolutely nothing to do with being nice or kind. It's about having the skill, the guts, the audacity, and the raw force of will to shape the world to your vision and to wrestle fate into submission. For Machiavelli, being effective was the only thing that mattered.
So this new, cold logic leads us directly to his most infamous, most quoted, and probably most misunderstood piece of advice. The ultimate dilemma that pretty much every leader has to face.
There it is. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. I mean, that is a shocking sentence. It's the line that pretty much cemented his evil reputation for all time. But why? Why on earth would he say that?
Well, his logic was cold and completely calculated, and it was all based on his, let's say, pretty bleak view of human nature. He said love is great, but it's totally unreliable. People are self-interested, he thought, and they'll break that bond of love the second it's not working for them. But fear of punishment, now that is something a ruler can always count on. It's a constant. In a dangerous world, you can't build your state on something as flimsy as love. You need the rock-solid stability that only fear can guarantee.
Okay, so if we can just look past the shocking advice for a minute, what's his real legacy? It turns out it's not a handbook for monsters, it's actually the invention of a whole new way of thinking about politics and power. This is the absolute core of his revolutionary idea. He was the first to draw this sharp, bright line between the rules of private morality, how you and I should act, and the brutal, separate rules of politics. He wasn't telling leaders to be bad people in their daily lives. He was arguing that the state, in its desperate fight for survival, has to play by a different, much harsher set of rules.
And this way of thinking has a name, political realism. And Machiavelli is pretty much considered its founder. See, he wasn't interested in utopian fantasies or how the world ought to be.
He wanted to analyze power as it is, how it's actually used in the messy, unforgiving real world.
This whole new analysis really rests on just a few core principles. First, politics basically operates in its own universe with its own rules. Second, the single most important goal above everything else is the survival of the state. And third, because he believed human nature is fundamentally selfish, a ruler has to be ready to do things we'd call immoral to protect that state. It's a cold logic, for sure, but when you look at his own life, you can see exactly how he got there.
So, when you put it all together, the myth starts to kind of dissolve. Machiavelli wasn't some demon who was just championing evil for its own sake. He was a broken man, maybe the world's first political scientist, and a cold, hard analyst of power. He wasn't prescribing what leaders should do, he was just describing what he saw them actually do to win.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty uncomfortable question. 500 years after he wrote his famous little book, when you look at the world today, at the way nations and leaders really behave in the pursuit of their own interests, their own security,